Hey everyone. So in this video I'm going to show you how to resolve an error that you may run into. Basically, if you have an app in production, we aren't handling a certain edge case, a scenario where someone could do something malicious to our application and break our application in production. So if you go to your YelpCamp application, let's go ahead and start ours. I've cloned down Colt's version 11, so I'm just going to go ahead and I actually have MongoD started, but I'll show you running it right now. So we have MongoD running from root inside of its own tab, and then over here inside of the version 11 directory, I'm going to go ahead and run not node app.js. You can use that if you'd like. I use something called nodedaemon. If you want to install that and follow along, it's just npm i-g nodedaemon. So you're installing nodedaemon globally in your application, or sorry, in your workspace, and then you can use it in your application. So whenever it gets installed, it takes a second. It's actually going to give you a little warning here. You can disregard the warning. That's not going to break it or anything. Just go ahead and let it install, and then once it's done, come on. There we go. All right, so now when it's done, you can just type nodedaemon app.js, or if you want for short, you can just do nodedaemon. Just make sure that you have app.js set as your main file inside of your package.json. So the server is started. Let's go ahead and take this right here. If you don't have this window, just go to preview running application. Once this little tab pops up, then go ahead and click this button here to pop out into a new window. All right. So we run into a couple different issues. If we look at this campground, we can change the ID to an ID that doesn't exist, but has the same original number of characters as the ID that does exist. And when we hit enter, okay, it says cannot read property image of null. So it's actually rendering the view for the show page, but because that campground doesn't exist and the campground is null, it can't read the campground.image code because there is no .image, there's no campground for .image to be called on. Okay, and so if we go back to the one that works, no problem. Here's the show page. If we try to go to edit, it's probably going to ask me to log in. So I'll go ahead and log in real quick. And now if we go to the edit page works fine. I'm the owner of this campground, so it lets me see this. Now if I change it to a 3 here, so, or any character for that matter, but we're keeping the same amount of characters, and I hit enter, it's going to break the application altogether. So this is a problem, especially if you have your application hosted on Heroku and someone does this with the application, then it's going to break your entire application. No one else is going to be able to view it for like the 20 minutes or whatever that it takes for them to restart your server. Okay, and if you go into Cloud9, you can see this is same error that we had before. This time it's a cannot read property author of null, so this is inside of the middleware. So it's not the exact same error, but it's similar. We have null, we're trying to call something on it, and it's giving a cannot read the property error message. Okay, so there's, I think, another scenario. Let's go back to the show page. I think we have to restart our server, so we'll go ahead and shut this down and restart it. We have to restart it. Normally, nodedaemon will restart it for you, but if you run into an error message like this, then you actually have to shut it down and restart it on your own. So if I go back to campgrounds with the server running, now, instead of keeping the same amount of characters, I'm just going to type in some random stuff, but it's not going to be the same amount of characters. I hit enter, and so you can see that the circle is moving here, and down the bottom left corner it says it's waiting. If we go take a look, we have a cast to object ID failed for value, yada yada at path ID. So we have a cast error. Okay, so this is also problematic. It's going to break your application. This one, I don't think we have to restart. Okay. If we go to more info, it's going to want me to log in, so I'll go ahead and log in. And if we go to the edit page and we change the ID to something different that doesn't exist but shorter than a real length of an ID for MongoDB, and we hit enter, this one actually gets handled. It says Campground Not Found. So that Campground Not Found, that's something that we did already in our middleware. So back here in our middleware directory, we have index.js. And you can see here's the Campground Not Found error. It's inside of the middleware object check campground ownership. Okay. So we're saying if the user's logged in, then find the campground and go ahead and send back an error if we don't find the campground. In which case there was an error, so we send back this flash message and then we redirect back, and nothing else gets run. So that's really the only one that's being handled. All those other scenarios weren't being handled, which is a problem. So we need to figure out a way to handle it if the campground not only is not found, but also returns null. And so the reason it's not throwing an error and it's just returning null is because you're passing in valid parameters to Mongoose, or in turn to Mongo, and Mongo just isn't finding anything in the database. So it's not getting an error saying like, okay, we couldn't find anything because the ID is too short. It's just saying, oh, there's nothing with that ID, even though the ID is technically valid in our database. So we're sending you back null. We're sending you back nothing. And so that's problematic for us, and we need to handle that. So if you know, let me go ahead and pull up in a little another terminal here just to show you. I'll open the node REPL. And so if we have null, and then we have not null is true. So what is not something? So if it's not something is true, then that something must be false, right? Or we can double bang, double exclamation, and then put null, and it'll actually tell you the truthiness or falsiness of the thing that we're looking at, in this case null. Okay, so null is false. Therefore, if an error exists, then this will get handled. Or if there's no found campground. So let's assume that found campground does get returned. There is no error, but this is a scenario where found campground is null. So we're saying, is there an error, or is there a item that is null? Because if it's not null, see here, it's going to return true. And if it returns true, then we're going to dip down into this block here, and we're going to flash the error message that the campground is not found, and we're going to redirect back. Okay, so that is handling the check campground ownership middleware. If you save that, we can go back to our YelpCamp, just make sure that your server is running. So I'll refresh this page, and if I try to go to edit, it's going to ask me to log in, so I'll go ahead and log in. And now if I go to the edit page, and there's two scenarios, remember? So the first one is we give it an ID that's valid but doesn't exist. So I'll just change one character from a 2 to a 3. Same number of characters here for the ID, and we hit enter. And now it's being handled, saying that campground's not found. If we go back, and this time I change it to a non-valid ID, and we hit enter, campground not found. Okay, great. This is what we want. In our Heroku application, if something happens like this, we want the user to see an error message as opposed to the entire application breaking, not just for that user, but for everyone else who views that website. So what about the show page? If we go to more info and we change this to a 3, okay, we get that cannot read property image of null. So let's solve that portion of it right now. So if we go back, we can close this middleware right here and open up our routes, go to campgrounds, and now for the show route, we're doing a find by ID, and then we populate the comments, exec, blah blah, and what we get back is either an error or a found campground. Now remember, the found campground can be null, so just saying if error is not helpful. So we need to say if error, or, so double pipes, no found campground, or not found campground, or bang found campground, then console log the error. Okay, console logging the error is not going to help us here. So we actually need to do something useful. So first thing we'll do is flash. And the first argument is going to be a string of error and then a comma. And then we'll say something like campground not found. Okay. Now on the next line, because we have encountered an error of sorts, now we need to redirect somewhere. So we'll do a res.redirect, and in this case we can just go back to /campgrounds. I believe that's what the other one does. I'm going to take a look at middleware index.js. In this case it just goes to back, so I will go ahead and do that. I'll do I'll just do the string back. And I've also noticed that Colt is using double quotes. It's fine either way, but it's to stay consistent with his code, I'll go ahead and use double quotes for all of these. Okay, so normally you would want to put a return here so that we would return out of this function and nothing else would get run. However, this is an if-else statement, so the else is never going to get run because the if returned true and this block of code was run. Okay, so this should be all we need. Let's go ahead and save this. And now if we refresh this page, it says campground not found. So just to reiterate, we go to more info. This is a show page. We change it to a 3, so it's the same amount of characters. And instead of returning null and giving us that error in the console, it's actually going to flash the error message. Okay, and then the other scenario is when something crazy is put in here that it's not valid but does not exist either, and we hit enter, campground not found. Okay, that's great. One other thing to bear in mind, let's go ahead and log in and create a comment. Hello world, of course. And so the show page for the comment is here, so we don't have to worry about the show page like we did here, the show page that we're looking at. However, we do have to worry about the edit. So if we go to edit and we change the ID here, then interesting. So it redirects, but it doesn't give us an error message. Let's go take a look at our code and see how it's being handled currently. So if we're done inside of here, make sure you save that and go to routes comments.js. And let's go down and take a look at the edit route. And my air conditioning just came on, so sorry if that creates some background noise. Okay, so we're doing a check comment ownership. So back in index.js, we can scroll down to check comment ownership in the middleware. And in this case, it just does a res.redirect back. Okay, so that's great, but it's not that helpful because it doesn't tell the user what's going on. So let's do a rec.flash error, and then we'll say comment not found this time. And I'm actually just going to copy this, and because we're going to use it in the route as well, kind of 1-2. Or we may not need to use it because it's first getting handled by the middleware, but we'll look at that in a second. Before we do that, remember we also need to do a or not found comment. Okay. So now you'll see how no daemon is restarted down here. So now I'm going to open up this show page. I have to log in. And we go to edit. And now if we change this from an A to a B and hit enter, comment not found. Let's go back and let's just change it to something random. Okay, comment not found. Great. Now what happens if we change the ID for the campground? So interesting, it's still bringing us to this view. Let's go see how that works. So in the comments.js, we are doing a middleware.check comment ownership, so that goes here. And as long as there's no error, then it says is the comment author ID equal to the rec.user ID. If it is, we go to the next line. Okay. So now, just save that. Now we're back here. This function is what gets called next. So then we're inside of the function here. and then we do the comment.find by ID found comment, and the campground ID is what gets passed back into the view. So let's go take a look at that view and see how the campground ID is being used. If we look at views, comments, edit, you can see that the campground ID is being plugged in here to the action for the form. Okay, so that could be problematic. So this page looks just like this page, but if we go forward to the one with the wrong ID and we inspect the form here, we can see that it's submitting to the wrong action. Okay, so let's see what happens when we change it. I'll just put a little parenthesis on the, or a little exclamation on the end there, and click submit, and it broke our application. Great, it says it was redirected too many times. So let's take a look at any potential error messages. So there's nothing going on inside here that is helpful to us, it doesn't look like. So if we go back to here and we refresh, it did not get edited, but it did break, so that is an issue. So if we go to comments.js, right here we never look for the campground to make sure that that's a valid campground. So it is an extra step, but you know, if somebody went in and tried to break our code, then it could shut our app down. Fortunately, you know, most people aren't going to know to do this, but your average user isn't going to run into this problem, but it is something you want to guard against. So let's go ahead and handle that now. So let's do a let's see here, formatting is kind of screwed up. Is it 2 spaces? 4. Interesting. So I'm going to fix the formatting a little bit. We'll do a tab, 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 tab. Okay, let's do a campground dot find by ID, and we will pass in, this is not a string, this is the request object dot params dot ID, and then we do a function error found campground, and we open it up here, and we'll say if error or no found campground, then we're going to do a, let's see here, rec.flash error, comma, and we'll say cannot find that campground. Or I think what we said before was something like no campground found. Okay, so then we'll do a, this time we'll do a return res.redirect, and we'll redirect back. Okay, and now let's take this and we'll cut it out. So I'm gonna use Command X or Control X on PC, and right beneath the if statement, but inside of the callback for campground.find by ID, we're going to paste this in. That's Command V, and it messed the formatting up. That's fine, we'll fix it real quick. And okay, so now our formatting is correct. So let's go ahead and do a review of what's happening here. We do our check comment ownership to make sure that the logged in user is in fact the owner of the comment. If they make it to this part of the route, then we check the campground that is in the URL, and if it's not a campground that exists, then we go ahead and redirect back with a error message. If it is, then we continue on and we find the comment, and then we redirect back to the edit page. So I'm going to save, and we will refresh. I'm assuming it's going to want me to log in. Great. So I'll go ahead and log in. So I'll go to more info, and now if we click edit on this comment, this loads fine. If we change the comment, we know that that will send us back here with the error message. Now we want to do what we want to do is change the campground. So I change it to something random, no campground found, or I change it to something valid but that does not exist, no campground found. Great. So that should handle all the different potential scenarios. If anyone happens to find another one, just let me know, and hopefully you can resolve it with the knowledge that you acquired from this video. But if you need some help, just leave a comment or create a thread in the Q&A, and we'll get to the bottom of it. Okay, so for a quick review, basically we just went to the routes for the show route for campground, the edit route for campground, and the, let's see here, comments edit route, and then the middleware that's associated with both of those routes for checking the ownership of the campground and the comment. And in pretty much all of those, we just added an extra bit here for checking whether or not the found comment or found campground is valid and not null. Otherwise, we do the error message and we go back. Okay. All right. That's it. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.